Hello everyone, we are Chad and
Ashley,
and this is our channel, Our Van. And today we're gonna do a video that we've talked about doing for a long
time. And something we're very proud of.
Yes.
One of the, I don't know what.
Yeah, one of our favorite features of this RV, which
it really is.
we actually did a lot of the work on, and the trip would not be the same without it.
No, it wouldn't.
And that is our fridge. So, where to start? Well, the first thing we're gonna look at is the fridge itself, which is actually not a fridge, it's a chest freezer. Oh, and before we get started, I know we're gonna talk about this as if it is a 12-volt fridge. Really, yes, technically it's a 110 or 120 volt chest freezer, but with these three parts we're gonna mention combined, it becomes a 12-volt fridge. So first, the fridge, and I'll put up on the screen what exactly these parts are. Wanna hold the camera? The fridge is a Avanti is the brand 2.5 cubic foot chest freezer, which we got at BrandsMart, which is a store that's in Florida, where we're from, and I think it's around the country too. And the initial cost of the fridge was $154.88. So, a deal for the fridge. You can see it's big, it's white, and it is top opening, which was important for us. We wanted the top opening so that we didn't lose all of the heat with a front opening fridge. The reason we went with the chest freezer instead of just buying a fridge is because of the insulation. Freezers are insulated way better than a fridge. So, also, we custom mounted it in here pretty fancy depending on where you're putting it. I would probably just leave it on the ground as is and just use the top as counter space. It actually is really good counter space, and it extends our tiny little kitchen here. When we want some extra space, we could just open it up and have more room here. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is how we changed this from a freezer to a fridge. So what we did is we added a thermostat. It was extremely simple to do. Let me show you. Pull this out. I don't remember what brand the thermostat is, but this is it right here. We just stuck it on with double-sided adhesive tape. If you can get a close-up of the inverter itself. So if you look at this thermostat, you can actually see that you can set it to whatever temperature you want, and we've got it set to a fridge temperature. All right, so if you look down here, you can see the way the thermostat works is you plug the fridge. This middle section of the cord is actually off the thermostat. So you plug the main power into the thermostat and then plug the fridge into the thermostat. So basically, it only allows power to go into the fridge when the fridge is at a certain temperature. And if you come up here, and if you look inside the fridge, you can see the thermostat measures the temperature with this little sensor, which hangs down deep inside the fridge there. So extremely easy to just stick that thermostat on there and change it from a freezer to a fridge. The next step is, of course, the fridge runs off 110 volt or 120. I never know which one it is. AC power, not DC. So how do we get that from AC to DC? You need an inverter. And we bought probably the cheapest inverter you could buy from Harbor Freight. It was, how much was it? It was $44.99 plus tax. So like 50 bucks. And we're gonna have to go outside to look at it. Let's go take a look. It's actually located under the bed here. All right, so for the inverter, we had to come outside. Our batteries are underneath the bed in here. And if you look up in here, we've got two batteries in here and two here. We have way more batteries than are actually required for this fridge. But if you look, you can see the inverter right up in here next to the batteries. And I know that's hard to see, but I'll put the part up on the screen so you can get a look at it. Let's go back inside. So how the whole system works, got the inverter connected right to the batteries at the batteries. We have an extension cord, which may or may not be necessary depending on where you put your fridge in relation to your batteries. I'll talk a little more about that in a second. So inverter there, extension cord runs around underneath to the back of the fridge. The extension cord plugs in to the thermostat, and then the fridge plugs in to the thermostat also. So the fridge only kicks on at fridge temperatures and when it needs to. Now, when we first installed this fridge, we actually had the inverter mounted directly above the fridge right here. But the reason that didn't work is because I didn't know too much about electricity, still don't. But basically, when electricity travels over a long distance, it travels much better at a high voltage than a low voltage. So with the original setup, we had 12 volt power running all the way from the batteries, all the way around underneath, up to the inverter. And because the long distance, it was probably about 20 feet that the 12 volt was traveling, the voltage drop was about 2 to 3 volts over that distance, which meant we were only getting about 9 volts to the inverter, and we were getting an alarm going off every time the fridge would try to kick on, and it wouldn't work. And like I said, high voltage travels better, and from the little online calculators I've punched the numbers into, it looks like the voltage drop is actually the same exact number, whether it's 120 volt or 12 volt. So, because of that, we're still getting that same about 2 to 3 volt drop on 120 volt, which isn't even noticeable because percentage-wise, it's 2% of 120, where it's, I don't want to do math, but 20, 25% of 12 volt? Big difference. So, once we moved the inverter under the bed, no more alarm, everything works perfectly. Definitely recommend it that way. Make sure your inverter is close to the batteries. So, those 3 parts got us this awesome fridge. I'm sure the big question is power consumption. How much does it use? And I don't have an exact answer, but I'm going to give you a good estimate and tell you that based off our battery bank, which is huge, it drains almost nothing every single night. A fully charged 12 volt battery sits at approximately 12.6 volts. We'll start at 12.6, and the next morning we might be at 12.5. It hardly drains our batteries at all. Percentage-wise, it might use 10% of our power just for the fridge. And most nights when it does do that 1 or 0.1 or 0.2 volt drop, it's because we have lights on, we might run the TV, we're charging our phones all night every night, so it's not just the fridge drawing off it making that drop. My best estimate, here's how I did. I looked at, it's Energy Star rated, meaning it comes with that nice little yellow square that tells you its power consumption. So I looked that up, and it is 137 kilowatt hours a year. If you break that down, it comes to, let me look at my numbers real quick. Using this little online calculator, 137 kilowatt hours a year at 120 volts comes out to 1,141.7 amp hours. So 1,141.7 amp hours divided by 365 days in a year would mean it's 3.1279, all those numbers per day consumption. And since we're at 12 volts, not actually 120, you gotta multiply it by 10. So the estimated use per day is 31.3 amp hours, roughly. Which, 31 amp hours a day, figure it's gonna use half that during the day, half at night when you don't have solar, means you're only actually gonna use maybe 16 amp hours of power overnight, which on our battery bank, it's huge. We have a 420 amp hour battery bank, which is way more than we could ever need. Don't know why we actually have that many. We kind of overkilled it. So on our system, that's nothing. But even if you had half the power, if you just had 2 golf cart batteries, which we have 4, so if you just had 2, you'd have a 210 amp hour system. Lead acid, the cheapest batteries we have, you can draw them down roughly halfway, which would mean you've got, what is that, Ashley? Do the math here. 105 usable amp hours. So at 105 usable, if you only use about 16 in a night, it's nothing. Like, this fridge draws almost no power. And compared to all the other options we looked at a lot of the 12 volt compressor run fridges. I don't remember the name brands. Do you?
No.
What's the main one?
I know, I can't. Dometic.
Yes,
right?
the main most popular one is the Dometic. We looked at those Dometic 12 volt compressor run fridges. I think they have the Dan Foss compressor, I believe it's called. They're supposed to be the most efficient fridges. And even those, I would be surprised if this one used more power than one of those did. It's got to be comparable because this thing is just so efficient. And those fridges cost about $1,000. So, our total cost on this fridge, rather than buying the $1,000 Dometic 12 volt fridge, all parts in on this, including the inverter, everything, to make it a 12 volt fridge. Let's break it down. The inverter was $44.99 plus tax. The thermostat, $63.92 plus tax. And the chest freezer itself, $154.88 plus tax, for a grand total of $263.79 plus tax. So basically, a quarter of the price of one of the standard 12 volt compressor fridges that are, I guess they're probably the most popular, they're the ones that everyone has. This was a quarter of the price. And one of my favorite parts is if you happen to be putting it into an RV, it fits in the slot that the old fridge went in almost perfectly. Now, if you're still hanging around, we'll mention how we mounted it. I think for most people, you can just put it on the floor, use the top as counter space, and kind of build it in to your counters if you're doing your own build out. That would be fine. But in our situation, we wanted to fit it into the fridge slot where the existing fridge was. And the only reason it wasn't really simple to do is because there's a couple water lines running right underneath where the fridge needs to go, so it couldn't be mounted flush to the floor and just put... It actually comes with wheels on the bottom of the freezer, by the way. We took them off to put them on this drawer, but if there wasn't water hoses there and it was just a level floor underneath, we could have just kept it as is, rolled it in and out, would have worked perfectly. But we had to build a custom drawer because if you look down here, we've got about a 1.5 inch lip there that the fridge has to come over. So if you take a step back here, what we basically did was we cut a piece of plywood the same size as the fridge, mounted these two little wheels on the front to make up for the height difference so it can roll all the way into there, and then we put it on two drawer slides. Let's see if you can get a look at them. And if you look back there, you can see the hinges and you could see our horrible spray foam insulation job. Those were the existing vents for the old fridge because it needed to vent because it was a propane fridge. So, I think I mentioned it all there. So, in conclusion, extremely efficient fridge. Actually, it's running right now. You probably just heard it in the last clip, but I'm sure it sounds louder on camera than in person. This thing is basically silent. Extremely cheap, extremely efficient. If you look inside, way bigger than most of the fridges you'd be looking at. I mean, we fit so much stuff in here. You could put, 20 water bottles in the bottom. You've got this top shelf. You've got a basket up here. We keep all our vegetables in a bag all the time. Basically, when we've been grocery shopping, we never have to think, is that going to fit in our fridge? We always just go for it, and there's always room because it's plenty big enough. And for that reason, that's why this fridge is probably our favorite feature in the entire van. Really a game changer when you can have a cold fridge 24/7. Also, if we didn't mention, it runs on solar full time. We have a video on our solar. You can go look at it if you want more information on that, but basically it's just a 300 watt kit from Renogy. So 300 watts of solar and our batteries is all you could ever need to keep this fridge cold 24/7 and have a ton of leftover power for anything else you could want. And I think that's where we're going to wrap up this one. If you don't already follow us, we'd love it if you do. We travel all over the country, see some really beautiful places. And catch up with you down the road next time. Ashley, anything you have to say?
No, just that we love our fridge and we definitely recommend it. And it's definitely an affordable option, which I feel like is hard, especially when you're looking at like Dometic fridges and things like that. It's so overpriced. And yeah, so if you're trying to do it on a budget, I definitely say go with this one.
Yeah, and if we forgot anything, you have any other questions on this fridge, how we did it, really just anything at all, feel free to comment down below and we would be happy to give you an answer to the best of our knowledge, at least. And I'll catch up with you on the next one.
Bye.